Good evening and welcome back. As we begin, I'd ask everyone to please ensure that your electronic devices are set in silent mode, please. We understand that tonight and tomorrow will be emotional, have already been emotional. We have made quiet spaces available for anyone who would like to step out to the room immediately outside of our auditorium. And we want to make sure that while you're here, you have what you need. We are grateful to our colleagues at the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, or HIDTA program. They're part of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. We want to thank them for their partnership and collaboration in the field, working on law enforcement operations and bridging public safety and public health, and here at our family summits. Thank you, Chris Yocum, from the HIDTA Overdose Response Strategy, for your leadership and support. Here to speak to you all about the HIDTA Overdose Response Strategy in collaboration with the CDC Foundation, our public health analyst, Sabrina Gattin, and Drug Intelligence Officer, Brent Klutz. Sabrina and Brent, please come up.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We are so appreciative of your dedication, resilience, and passion, and we are honored to be here to celebrate and honor your loved ones. Brent and myself are here to talk about the overdose response strategy and how we can connect you to resources to further your work. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide, please. This is just a federal acknowledgement. This presentation is supported in part by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as part of a financial assistance award totaling $11 million with 100% funded by CDC HHS. The contents are those of myself and Brent and do not necessarily represent the official views of nor an endorsement by CDC, HHS, or the U.S. government. Next slide, please.
Okay, as was mentioned, my name is Brent Klutz. I'm the Drug Intelligence Officer for the state of Maryland through the Overdose Response Strategy and the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, HIDTA. I'm a Maryland native. I grew up in the Baltimore metro area. In 2002, I began my police career with the Ocean City Police Department. For those of you who don't know that area, it's a coastal vacation town not far from here. I was then recruited by the National Security Agency, where I operated as a canine handler. Around 2007, I began my process joining the Baltimore City Police Department. I was made detective. I specialized in violent crime and a series of different types of narcotics investigations.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sabrina Gattin. I'm the public health analyst for the state of Maryland. I've worked in a variety of different roles in the realm of substance use, from shelters to research with pregnant people who use drugs in Argentina to, prior to this role, I was working for the Philadelphia Department of Public Health, doing street outreach and harm reduction and providing vaccines for people who use drugs and people experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. So I'm sure you're all wondering, what is the overdose response strategy? I do want to start by caveating that the name of our program is the Overdose Response Strategy, but we will be using fentanyl poisoning in this presentation as well. The overdose response, thank you. The Overdose Response Strategy is an unprecedented and unique collaboration between public health and public safety, created to help local communities reduce drug overdoses and save lives by sharing timely data, pertinent intelligence, and innovative strategies. In each state, there's at least one public health analyst, myself, and one drug intelligence officer, which is Brent in this case. This team is created to allow inroads with both public health and public safety and break down silos. Next slide, please. So the ORS is supported by the Office of National Drug Control Policy, or the ONDCP, and the CDC Foundation. In each state, the PHA and DIO are paired with a public health and public safety partner. In Maryland, we're partnered with the Maryland Office of Overdose Response and the Washington-Baltimore HIDA. Next slide, please. So the mission of the ORS is to help communities reduce fatal and non-fatal drug overdoses and fentanyl poisonings by connecting public health and public safety agencies, sharing information, and supporting evidence-based interventions. The ORS is really specific in our focus. Our North Star is to prevent drug overdose and fentanyl poisonings. While the goal of the ORS is specific, the methods of achieving this outcome are broadly defined. The ORS encourages our state and local partners to tailor the specific needs, their specific strategies to fit their needs. Next slide, please. So all of the work we do in the ORS falls under one of these 4 overarching strategies. The first is share data systems to inform rapid and effective community overdose prevention efforts. We'll be touching upon ODMAP a bit later on, but that's one of the tools we use regularly in our team. The second is support immediate evidence-based response efforts that can directly reduce overdose deaths. Something that we work a lot with in Maryland is naloxone distribution and saturation. The third is design and use promising strategies at the intersection of public health and public safety. In our case, we work in pre-arrest diversion programs such as LEAD. And fourth is disseminate information to support the implementation of evidence-informed prevention strategies that can reduce substance use and overdose. With HIDA, we work a lot with ADAPT, which is a program that works to educate and prevent substance use among youth and in schools. Next slide, please. So here are some more concrete examples of strategies that ORS teams work on. Each team is not necessarily deeply involved in all of these, but they will certainly have the tools and resources to help you achieve your goals. A couple of these are data analysis and dissemination, training and education, criminal justice diversion, linkages to care, and overdose prevention in jails and prisons. Next slide, please. Obviously, not all of you are from Maryland, so I wanted to make sure you all knew how to reach your own ORS team in your state. We're here to amplify your voices and efforts by providing you with support, technical assistance, and resources. So you can scan that QR code, and that will bring you right to the ORS program website. This is an interactive map. You can just click on your state and find your team. Or you can just go to orsprogram.org. Next slide, please. Again, our overarching goal is to foster collaboration between public health and public safety, so we wanted to dive into a couple more specific examples from our work in Maryland. Next slide, please.
Okay, HIDA's been explained several times now as the high-intensity drug trafficking area, right? One of our main goals is dismantling, disrupting drug trafficking organizations throughout the country. It's important to note that HIDA itself is not a government agency. Okay, we're a program, all right? And that's important to know because we can act more as a neutral party between resources. This allows us as HIDA to address the drug threats in a little bit different perspective than our partners. We work in a space where federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, and local law enforcement, we all come together and we share our resources, to investigate our knowledge, our experience in that particular area. I myself, I was assigned to HIDA in the latter part of my career with Baltimore City. So that being said, we play many very important roles of law enforcement, one of which is we serve as a data repository. Us being a neutral, again, we can house this and we're not manipulating anything, we don't own anything. This allows us to notify investigators if more than one case is being developed on a single target. For an example, if there was a drug dealer in Baltimore City being investigated and a drug dealer being investigated in DC, we can make those connections and notify both those investigators. So they can bring those cases together to help better the case, make a stronger case for prosecution. Next slide, please. So as you can see on this map, HIDA is represented in all 50 states to include DC, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm fortunate enough to be a member of the Overdose Response Strategy in HIDA. I can reach out to any one of these states and open up an open line of communication, share resources, and so we can support each other. Next slide, please. This leads me into an initiative that Sabrina and I are actively involved in. It's just started being developed this summer. It's known as the Baltimore Fentanyl Overdose Working Group. In case you missed it, over the past several years, Baltimore's received quite a bit of bad press. Okay, usually it's surrounded around violent crime or the riots. But most recently, we've been getting a lot of press when it comes to fentanyl poisoning, overdosing. It seems to really be hitting hard. So again, over the past summer, the Baltimore Mayor's Office contacted Washington Baltimore HIDA, expressing developing a partnership focused on fentanyl-related death investigations. Clearly, we all knew that we could use traditional methods for investigating and taking down these drug trafficking organizations. But we wanted to develop a strategy that encompassed both law enforcement and public health. Try to bring everybody together, try to work together to take off these targets. All right, in our fields, with public health and public safety, it's pretty known that we don't always see eye to eye on everything. So by doing a collaboration like this, we're able to use each other to try to really assist the community in healing. So by removing fentanyl or whatever the poisoning is in that particular community, and then bringing in and implementing public health resources, hopefully we can make a more of an impact. So as these conversations progressed throughout the past couple months with different partners, we were able to bring in different resources, different partners. And so as it shows here, MONSE, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Engagement, or Safety and Engagement, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the State's Attorney's Office, the Baltimore Police Department, the DEA, HIDA Overdose Response Strategy, us, the HIDA Investigative Support Center, the HIDA ODAC program, that's a coordinator in each one of our counties in Maryland. They all speak together about drug trends, overdose, poisonings. There's a clear line of communication. We meet quite often. The Maryland National Guard, the Baltimore Fire Department, and where we're rolling out this program in the District of Baltimore, we've identified 2 public health partners. Unlimited Bounds and By Grace Counseling Services.
Yes, as the public health partner, I'm especially excited to get to collaborate on this project with Baltimore. We're really excited to explore more trauma-informed responses, increase access to services, and treatment as well. So that's something we're working on currently.
Okay, HIDA's role in this is pretty easily identified. We're already serving as a data repository, and we offer analytical support, investigative support. Our role, again, was pretty clear. So the idea is for overdose victims, cell phones, DTO members' cell phones, to be brought to the HIDA, all right, so we can download and use different methods to open these phones and get data out of them. So in a sign of good faith, we committed to train detectives out of Baltimore City on these methods. We also purchased an advanced computer system to increase the limit download times. It can be a timely process. And the idea behind all this is to remove as much workload from the men and women working the streets in Baltimore, in these communities. So recognizing the staff shortages, we reassigned a Baltimore detective within our investigative support center. His primary duty is to transport and maintain these cell phones, to maintain a chain of custody. Legally, that's a pretty important thing. So he's to retrieve the cell phones, bring them to the HIDA, and then we were able to get into them and start building a case. It's just one way that we do this. So the Baltimore Fentanyl Overdose Working Group, our goal is identifying the communities in most need of public health and law enforcement resources, identifying the drug trafficking organizations distributing the fatal supplies of fentanyl, applying the appropriate strategy for that community, And with cellular data and investigative methods, we intend to prosecute fatal fentanyl overdose as in drug-induced homicides in Baltimore. Next slide.
So another project Brent and I have been working on as the Maryland ORS team are these regional tours, which we have been doing to build relationships and foster communication sharing between public health and public safety across the state. So essentially, we've split the state into quadrants. These are the 4 sections, and have been spending a week at a time in each section of the state and meeting with both public safety and public health in each county and jurisdiction. This has been so beneficial for us to be able to make these connections, both for ourselves and between and within counties. Again, we mentioned the siloing. That is something that is pretty universal, so we're really trying to build relationships and break that down. Brent, do you want to speak about it?
Yeah, thank you. So I've gained a tremendous amount of respect for the public health organizations in our state. Okay, the work that you all are doing and the partners that I've met with have just been fantastic. Okay, and it can also be viewed as a resource that I didn't know was available before joining the ORS. Our state, although small, is very diverse. Okay, we have a mountainous area that's very impoverished, and then we have some of the very most expensive communities, the most wealthiest communities in the country, all within just a few hours' drive of one another. So I've learned a lot in this space. By speaking to people who are involved, people who have used drugs, people who are in recovery, people who are actively using drugs, I've just learned a ton. It's, what are you paying for? How much? Like, what are they mixed with? How are they being used? How's it being packaged? How can you tell when there's a change in supply? All these things, they vary throughout the region, okay? The Western Maryland doesn't necessarily source their drugs from Baltimore City, okay? PG County, just out of DC, doesn't necessarily source out of Baltimore City. Practically, they probably come to DC. So we have several different sourcing areas, Philadelphia as well. All these things, I was trained by law enforcement on how to recognize, and I read documents every day on pricing, use, packaging. But by speaking to people who have had that lived experience, I found to be just invaluable. And one thing I have learned is the fentanyl, it's in every community. There's no hiding it. It's here. It's from Western Maryland to the Eastern Shore.
To what I mentioned before, ODMAP is a tool that we use really regularly in our role as the ORS, and it's something we do technical assistance with. Many of you may be able to get access to ODMAP as well. This is just a screenshot of what the website looks like. We'll go to the next slide, please. So ODMAP is a free web-based tool that provides near real-time surveillance of suspected overdose events to support public safety and public health efforts to mobilize an immediate response to overdose events. It's a really cool tool. We have heat mapping, and you can see the dots of overdose events. If you're interested in this, you can take a little picture of this contact information. That's Emily Hughes, who's our ODMAP coordinator, who can help figure out if you're eligible for access to this tool and help you get started. Yes?
I have a quick question. So something we brought up at the regional summit this year was, is there a way to get this information to the public through emergency broadcasting systems? Like you get an alert on your phone when there's a fire in your neighborhood. Since this is being displayed in real time, isn't there a way that you guys could find to send that to the public when there's fentanyl overdoses in their areas?
Yes, there is actually. Thank you for bringing that up. ODMAP has a great feature called spike alerts. So there is a threshold calculated by a formula that I don't know off the top of my head, but Emily could help you with that. And if your area is in a spike, you can sign up to receive these emails. and be alerted. I'm not sure if we have time for questions. Yeah, we've got to keep going, but we will be around and would love to speak to all of you about this. Next slide, please. So this is a bit more information about who's eligible to have a login account to ODMAP, which is federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement and criminal justice personnel, public health personnel, licensed first responders, and hospitals with emergency departments. So you do have to sign a participation agreement prior to gaining access, but Emily Hughes can help you with that, and we can help connect you with her. Next slide, please.
All right, so clearly fentanyl has affected every one of us in this room tonight, okay? And it's important for all of us to know that we're not alone, and this is a great opportunity to make connections here to try to help one another. I myself have lost family members to this, friends, and most recently, my good friend Angie, who's in the crowd tonight, has lost her daughter this past summer, Caitlin. Unfortunately, there's more of us every day. There's surviving, you know. Through our efforts and collaboratively, I hope that one day we can help and find a solution to this problem. Next slide, please.
This is our contact information. We'll be around in the back if you have questions you'd like answered tonight, and we'll be tabling tomorrow as well with more handouts and information, but we're here for you. And we would love to talk to each and every one of you, connect you with your own teams. And again, we just thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sabrina and Brett. Some of you here tonight attended DEA's inaugural National Family Summit back in 2022. The theme of that first summit was Stronger Together. Last year, we gathered here for the second annual National Family Summit, and our theme was Creating Common Ground. This year, our theme is Families Make a Difference. And oh boy, do you make a difference. Supporting other families who are struggling, telling your story, raising awareness, spreading words of caution about dangerous drugs and dangerous places to access those drugs, working with other organizations across your local communities, and making communities safer and healthier, making a difference. There's another area where you have made a difference, and that's right here at DEA. And we're going to explore that now. I'd like to invite up to the stage, and as I do that, I'll ask our audiovisual team to transition the screen up and our stage lights. I'd like to invite up to the stage a trio of DEA special agents that represent three different diverse examples of how your involvement as families with us across DEA has and is making a difference in our work every day. Please help me welcome to the stage, and again, if I could ask the screen to go up. Please help me welcome to the stage Special Agent Mark Kuzmicki, Special Agent Greg Chakowski, and Special Agent Frank Tarantino. And joining Special Agent Tarantino is Rhonda Goldstein from New York. If y'all could please come up. Are we putting these out? Yeah. Thanks, Rhonda. Thank you. We do a quick mic test just to make sure everything's up and running. The little green light is on your
Test, test.
all right.
Test, test, 1, 2, 3.
We love it when
Test.
technology. We love it when technology gets together. Folks, our plan now is to have a conversation with three fairly unique perspectives from the standpoint of DEA. Joining us from our Special Operations Division, which covers both national and international coordination, is their acting Deputy Special Agent in Charge, Mark Kuzmicki. Joining us from the DEA Chicago Field Division, representing really boots on the ground local work across Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, Special Agent Greg Chakowski, and our Special Agent in Charge for our DEA, all of the DEA New York Field Division, Frank Tarantino. I'm going to start, Mark, with you, and we're going to start with your perspective and the perspective of your colleagues working these national and international operations and cases and coordination. How has, well, first of all, what do you all do for those that might not be familiar with DEA nationally, internationally? And then how has that work over particularly the last 3 years been affected by y'all's engagement with families?
Good afternoon, thanks for having me. Like Sean said, my name is Mark Kuzmicki. I'm assigned to DEA's Special Operations Division. At SOD, as it's known, we are made up of about 34 different agencies with about 400 plus members that support the investigations in the field and around the world. What we do is we share information and we support all the overdose response and fentanyl poisoning teams out there in the field by taking that information. We take that information to the field and make sure the investigators have what they need to use best business practices to process the crime scenes of loved ones that have passed away from fentanyl poisoning. And I think the second part of your question is how has that affected us? 20 years ago, I was a police officer in New York when I started my law enforcement career. And you see that micro scale of helping people out in the street. And every once in a while, you get a thank you from someone. And it's far and few between because you get called at the worst times. Someone calls 911, it's not to say hello, it's something bad's going on or they need help. And every once in a while, you get that thank you from someone walking the street, and it's just like a little something that keeps you going. When you move to the federal side and you work for DEA, you're going after these supply chains, these cartels, these networks on a grander scale. You're trying to stop the drugs at the source before it comes in and get the biggest, baddest players that make the maximum impact. And so you kind of lose sight of that in a sense. You don't get that thank you, that instant gratification, because you're working in the shadows with these bad players. When it came to working these fentanyl poisoning cases, and I was in Los Angeles and Reno before coming to headquarters, I got to see the crime scenes basically, and I got to work with some of the families and see where people lived, and just the amount of impact, how it really touches you is that you see people, what they go through, and it just keeps you going. It's that fire to continue doing what we do as the reason we do it. I mean, it's not for the money. It's a calling, yes, but seeing the people that, at the end of the day, it's a job for us. You guys are living through it, and the fact that you're still here, I mean, you guys are brave. You guys are heroes for being here in this room. The fact that you lose a loved one and you're still here fighting and spreading the word to prevent others, that says a lot. So thank you all for being here. That's what keeps up myself going. That and my 10-year-old son, that I'm in fear that one day a friend of his, not knowing, is going to give him a pill. And just hearing from the families and seeing you guys continue the fight keeps us in the fight.
And you said us, and let me take a quick second and just clarify. You have had families come to the DEA Special Operations Division to tell their stories and to engage your fellow special agents and intelligence analysts and folks from the interagency that are there as well.
Correct. Andrea in the room, she came to DEA last year and a couple other families, and it's the same thing. You wouldn't expect it, but it really hits home when people hear the stories of how it's affected them and how agents and analysts and everyone else within DEA and our law enforcement partners hear these things and how it can affect people. And it's what just keeps people going.
Thank you, Mark. Greg, I want to pivot to you, and we're moving to the DEA Chicago Field Division. Greg, you have worked on the enforcement side, but of late you've also been working on the community side. Talk about what you do across the Chicagoland area and up into Wisconsin and over into Indiana, and how your work with families has affected you and your colleagues over the past couple of years.
Okay, great. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Special Agent Greg Chakowski out of the Chicago Field Division. Been with DEA 19 years, started in New York, and then came out to the Chicago area where I'm originally from. The last 7 years, basically, is what I've been doing as the demand reduction coordinator. I'm the last demand reduction coordinator, where we have a lot of community outreach specialists now that are taking those positions. So I'm one of the last agents that's still doing this type of work. Working with the families, like, over the last several years with this fentanyl crisis that we have, these poisonings, these overdoses, a lot of families have come to us. And, they're looking for help. Obviously, they're seeking, justice for what had happened, but they're also, seeking other answers as well. And I'm telling you, at least the impact that I've seen personally in our office, along with our agents and intel and diversion investigators, everyone, I mean, we really feel as much as we can in terms of the pain that you all are going through, and we want to do something to make a difference. We really do. And working with those families, and when they've come to us, what's been great is we're able to collaborate with them and then connect them with other families. I know I have several of the families that I've worked with here. If you guys want to stand up in my division, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, so thank you very much. It takes great strength and courage to do what you guys are doing. And know that us, as DEA, and what we're representing is we're in the fight. We are in the fight right with you. We are, 1,000%. And hearing those stories and trying to collaborate with you, one of the things that a lot of the families are wanting to do, they're wanting to get involved in schools, for example, to spread that knowledge of the dangers of what's going on out there. And I've been able to do that with a lot of these families. Just in the last 7 years that I've been doing demand reduction and these community outreach, I've talked about 36,000 kids. Just my own presentations that I'm doing on behalf of DEA. And let me tell you something. 3-4 years ago when we would do it, and I'd start talking about fentanyl, I'd say, who here has heard of fentanyl? I'd be lucky to get a hand up. Now, almost every hand is coming up. And I appreciate that from the administrator's point of view, because everything that you are doing and trying to help with all of DEA, we are making a difference.
Greg, do you find that the families are force multipliers for you or not?
No, 100% force multipliers. Okay. Because a lot of the families now have become friends and they're connecting with each other, even across the states. Even families coming from not even my division, but other divisions coming to show support for loved ones that had been lost and things like that. So it is a force multiplier, and it is helping bring awareness. And that is one of the things that's extremely important for what my side of the house is doing right now.
Thanks, Greg. Frank, let's pivot to you and to the great New York Field Division. Talk a little bit about, from your perspective, leading that division and your history on the front lines of DEA over the years. And then I also want you to introduce everyone to Rhonda, and let's talk through that story as well.
Yeah. Well, first, Sean, thank you for being here and doing this event. I mean, you deserve a ton of credit for putting this together, so thank you for that. And thank you for the invitation. It's an honor and privilege to be here and represent the New York Division. The men and women of the New York Division are committed each and every day to save more lives, and it's because of all of you that we are really driven to do that kind of work. You heard both Mark and Greg are from New York in some way. We're recruiting them actively to come back to New York. We could use all the help that we can get. I'm really here today to really support Rhonda, and I'll talk about Rhonda in a moment. But I'm also here for all the families that I recognize and that are from the New York region. Of course, some of them are from outside the New York region that come to the Times Square event or the Black Posters Project event. And it's really because of all of them, all of you, whether it's Andrea Thomas or Drina Dinero or Barbara Stein or Paul Martin or Chris Didier, Lou and Rebecca who are here. It's because of all of you that we do this work, and we couldn't do it without you. You heard Administrator Milgram talk earlier today that one of the key points that has really resulted in us having an impact in a positive way of driving down drug overdoses and poisonings and the drug-related violence that is plaguing all of our cities is because of you. And when we have had you at our family summits, and when we have had you at our events in Times Square, and we have the opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder with you, that inspires us, it drives us, and it really makes a big difference. And that's where we met Rhonda. Rhonda Goldstein came to our very first family summit in 2016, in November 16th, 2022, at the DEA office in New York. Rhonda sat quietly, like many of you are right now, and listened to all of our information, our data that we were trying to share with you so you could go and champion our message. And then quietly, she came up to me after one of the presentations and shared her story, much like all of your tragic stories. And what I said to Rhonda that day and through several emails is what I would say to any parent, any mother, father, son, daughter, grandmother, grandfather, is that we will always listen. We're always available to listen, and we can promise you that we will do absolutely everything that we can in our power, in our authority, to give your family justice in some sense of peace, if that's possible. And so with that conversation, Rhonda was able to share with us some really invaluable, I would say, case information that we were able to exploit. And I'll turn it over to Rhonda at this point, but I want to thank Rhonda for not just being courageous enough to come to the summit, but also courageous enough to share her story and to have the confidence in law enforcement that we would do our job. So thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you, Frank. So, yeah, my name is Rhonda Goldstein, and I'm so grateful to be here because, as I think any bereaved parent would say, the greatest gift is being asked to speak about our child. So thank you. I'd like to talk about two things. I'll share a bit about my son's story, and then I'd like to talk about my experience with the DEA Family Summits. So first of all, I have to do this. This is my son. This is Jonathan. He died on July 11th, 2020. He was killed by fentanyl poisoning, and he had just turned 22 years old. So he's here with a turtle, in case you can't see. Okay, so to start, just to give you a picture of who Jonathan was, when he was very, very small, we started to call him Captain Happy Boy, because he woke up every day filled with sort of joy and excitement and this fantastic sense of wonder. As he got older, his nickname for me, to him, became Johnny Sunshine. He maintained that sense of wonder and the joy and the excitement, and there was just a light about him. And I found that, to me, he was, a kind, gentle soul. He loved his family. There are many, many qualities, but what I found really wonderful was hearing about him from his friends after he passed, because I think that painted a real picture of who he was, because they know him in a different way. And some of the adjectives that came up all the time were, sweet, kind, gentle, beautiful mind, beautiful soul. And again, people mentioned his sense of wonder at the world. So a bit about who he was toward the end of his life. He was a student, he was a musician, he was a songwriter, he had just recorded a demo album. Our house was filled with music because he had a home studio, and it was just wonderful. And he liked to read, he loved movies, and in fact, he died right before COVID. We spent so much time watching movies in lockdown, and in fact, just before he died, he introduced me to the work of Werner Herzog, which I thought was fantastic. He was just so lovely to be around, always sharing information and making playlists for family and friends. And so he was a really quiet guy, although he was also fantastically funny. But he was a quiet guy, and with this gift he had for music, he didn't sort of show off and want to be a rock star. What he did, and I heard so many stories after he died, is that he invited friends to play in his studio in our home, and he would put a guitar in someone's hand and maybe teach them some chords. And he would say to them, just play. Don't care if you can't do it, if it's new, if you think you're bad, just play. And I think that really spoke to the kind of person he was. At the time that he died, he had just received his associate's degree. He had taken some time off from his first 2 years of school for mental health breaks and also to travel. But he had just completed his associate's degree. He was transferring to the city to complete his BA. He had an academic scholarship. He graduated with his associate's degree on the dean's list. He worked really hard despite the struggles he had with anxiety, OCD, and depression. Which brings me to sort of how we came here. He was prescribed Xanax when he was 18 years old. And Xanax, he found, was the only thing that calmed him, that made him feel like things were bearable. Unfortunately, we lost our GP right when COVID started. We moved to a different practice. So apparently my son was really struggling with lockdown, because again, July 2020, things were really tough in New York. His school went online, his part-time job was finished, he was socially isolated. And he reached out to someone he knew from high school who was the weed guy back in high school. And apparently he brought over what was supposed to be Xanax for Jonathan. So on a Friday night, July 10th, we were all at home, my son, my daughter, our dogs. We were watching a movie. My son had arranged a movie and pizza night for the next night. We all said good night to each other, went to our rooms, and I remember thinking that thing that parents think, how wonderful it is we're all safe under one roof. You know, my kids are home. And the next morning, he didn't wake up. So my daughter and I opened the door to his room, and we found him, and I'm sure a lot of you have been through that experience. I don't need to go into it. But the police came, and I couldn't figure out what had happened to him. Like, why didn't he wake up? I had no idea. And when the police came, they said something about fentanyl. And I thought, fentanyl? What? I'd heard it, like maybe on like police shows or like a real life cop show or something. Like, what is that? And I'm like, no, he has nothing to do with fentanyl. And then toxicology came back, and it turns out that he did. He was killed by taking what he thought was a Xanax, but was actually pure fentanyl. And that was the end of our son's life. So I would like to talk a little bit about how then that led me to the DEA Family Summit. There's a long and complicated story about an investigation that followed. I will try to make it really, really short. We fell under 2 different police jurisdictions. The first police department I went to was horrible. It's the kind that we all dread. We've all had experiences. Many of us have had experiences. They didn't do a thing. They kept his phone, didn't do a thing. Then I went to the other police station, and I'll call them out, Clarkstown Police Department. They were amazing. They knew the person who did it. I forgot to tell you, we had his name. We found out who it was, and I shared that name. They knew him. He was known to them. They had been trying to stop him for ages. About 6 months after I filed my police report with them, they arrested him on drug charges and weapon charges. And that ended up with a conviction that led him to state prison for 2 years. But in terms of the death of my son, they couldn't do a thing. And then when I met with them, they told me that there were at least 6 other deaths connected to this guy, who at the time was 22 years old, like my son. And so he was kind of like a fentanyl serial killer. And there were many poisonings that were survived also. So they were really keen to get him, but there was just, in terms of New York State law, there was just nothing they could charge him with for these deaths. So then I came through Clarkstown, they brought me to the summit. And I spoke with Zach Tarantino, and that was the beginning of changing everything. Because I was so moved when you said, we tell the messages that talk to us, we listen, but that's exactly what you did. And I'm so grateful. You listened to my story, you said, write to me, and I thought, okay, I'll try. You wrote back, you gave me the names and numbers of 2 DEA agents in my area of New York, in the Hudson Valley. And it's not an easy story after that, but with lots of pushing and pushing and pushing. On July 10th of 2023, which was the night before my son's 3rd anniversary, I got a phone call from one of the DEA agents, and he said, how are you doing? And I said, well, not so great. Tomorrow's my son's 3rd anniversary. And he said, I know, that's one of the reasons why I'm calling you. And then he told me that he was sitting in the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District, and they proceeded to explain to me that they'd gotten an indictment. And this person, yeah, it was amazing. And this person was indicted on 6 counts, very serious charges, with the mandatory maximum being life, right? Yeah. My son was part of the indictment. And went on from there. But, the compassion that they showed me and the timing, I was so grateful for. And then toward the idea of the families matter, families make a difference. All they could tell me was, you made a difference. You did this, you pushed it. I was the crazy mama bear. Because, I always say that I couldn't save my son's life, but I could try to get justice. And so I say that was my last act as the mama bear for my son. I think that's it. I've said more than enough.
Thank you, Rhonda. Go ahead, please, Frank.
Yeah, she's really being very modest in her remarks about herself. I mean, she was always a professional and always courteous and respectful to us, and I think hopeful, always hopeful. But what is amazing is that she was persistent, right? So I think if there's the three P's, right? It's purpose, proximity, and persistence, right? And we had purpose, we had shared purpose, but we had proximity from the summit. The summit brought us together, and because of that proximity, we were able to learn her story, and we were able to follow up on that story. And we can't always achieve the result that we achieved in Jonathan's case, but he was the suspect, who shall remain nameless, was arrested the following day on July 12th, and he was charged with 5 other overdoses, two of which were fatal, one of which was Jonathan. But it's a credit really to Rhonda and again for her commitment and dedication, but also her persistence. And the persistence is what brought us over the line. And I want to thank her for that. And I want to thank, obviously, we had a great partner in the United States Attorney's Office in Southern District of New York.
Yeah.
And they were at the summit as well, and that made the big difference. So it's a great story. It's a tragic story that ends with a good result. But this is what we strive for, and this is why we do what we do.
Frank, do you have any words of wisdom to the many other families who are joining us this evening? And I'm going to take the DEA hat off and just say law enforcement in general, words of encouragement or wisdom on their persistence in engaging with law enforcement, particularly when you might get some initial feelings of, oh, it's awful, and we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, I think a lot about the summits and I know Administrator Milgram's sitting in the front row, but her direction and guidance in terms of, I always remember, give out your business card. And that has really stuck with me, resonated with me, and there's some people in the audience today, and I'm not gonna mention their names, but there was also a number of other successful investigations in which I've had the distinct, I would say, pleasure, because you're all amazing people, of meeting them. And then through that family summit, we were able to meet other families that have a similar story. And we were able to bring 2 other really great investigations that we are very optimistic we will reach a great conclusion. But that's because they were, again, at the family summits. And they shared their stories, and they followed up. And I think that's the key, right? To follow up, to keep asking the question. Persistence, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story, Rhonda, and for being here, and for being the persistent mama bear.
Yeah.
May I add one thing?
Sure.
Because this is just the best opportunity to meet people and to talk. In my community, I've connected with a lot of other parents who are trying to get cases together. I try to support them, share with them what worked for me, things that didn't work. If anybody is trying to get an investigation together and you want to talk, I would love to talk to you about it today or tomorrow.
Rhonda, another follow-up, if I may. For the families who are with us tonight that know other families that might not have participated in a DEA regional family summit, and as our organization begins to set up for regional family summits in 2025, any words of encouragement or insight to them about connecting them with their local DEA office?
Sure. I think one thing that's really important to remember when pursuing this is there's emotion and there's evidence. So a lot of the parents I talk to are like, well, this happened, this happened, this happened. It's all emotion, their emotional reaction to what happened. But if you can approach someone, you can approach law enforcement or your local DEA and really, really try to think about what is evidence, what would stand up in a court of law, what can really make this case succeed. That's helpful. Also, make yourself someone that the police are happy to work with, if that sounds right. But like when you get a job, like I remember my first job I ever had, make yourself someone they want to work with.
Yeah.
But it's really important because it becomes a partnership, and I'm very, very close with the law enforcement people that I worked with. I relied on them for everything, and they were a great comfort. The other thing is, I had another point I can't remember.
It's about participating with regional family summits next year?
Yes, when you're at the summit, talk to people, because find out what other people have been through. Find out what luck they've had, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. Like I've met so many great people at the summits I've been through, and it's been really helpful. Another thing is, if you're trying to present a case, make it personal for law enforcement, because they're amazing. They want to help you, but when you're just an email, you're just in black and white. Make your story, make your child's life come to life for them. On every email I wrote to anyone, I attach pictures. Yeah. Wow, my sons through the years. Yeah. But really, make it personal. Attach pictures so that they understand and they can relate to you. I think that was a big help.
Thank you, Rhonda. Greg, let's pivot it for a moment. We talk about persistence and families making a difference. I know you have experience in Wisconsin and Illinois, but talk about families helping touch other influencers of youth, teachers, schools, community organizations, and what role families can have in making a difference where sometimes DEA hits a brick wall.
Well, I think one of the difficult things for us sometimes is when I've tried to get into the schools and stuff, and it's like, oh, we don't have a problem, we don't, Drug Enforcement Administration wants to come in and talk. It's not about that, as we all know. It's raising awareness and education. A lot of times those families, because they have lost a loved one, unfortunately, they can impact into the school and say, hey, we have a story we want to share because we want to help prevent this from happening to other people. So that is one way that they can get in, but then that also helps us to work together with them, and also not only in schools, but in the communities. I've done several of my speaking engagements in kind of like a town hall form sort of thing, and it's been because of the families that I've worked with. And so it's...
I'm sorry, just a question that, so it's the family that helped set that up?
Yeah, in some cases.
Brought you in as a subject matter expert?
Essentially, okay. Yes. In some cases, that has been that.
Okay.
But your stories are so impactful, and I have no problem with teaming up with a family to be able to talk about the DEA side of things and what we're experiencing, what we're seeing, and how we're trying to do the good work out there, but then also those families and their impactful stories. So I think that's where the connection really comes into play, and I just appreciate all of you for what you're going through, and just always, like I say on the range, stay in the fight. Always stay in the fight, and you are all doing that.
Thanks, Greg. Mark, pivoting on Greg's point about raising awareness, and families are doing that regularly, and we know fentanyl is priority one. But from your perspective at the national and international level and Special Operations Division, kind of seeing the big trends and the big intel, what else should families be cognizant of to talk about, what might be on the horizon, and how do you suggest about that?
I think as everyone talked tonight, it's a partnership. It's raising awareness, it's prevention. I think one of the key dangers is the accessibility, that anyone could get their hands on it. If you have a smartphone, if your children have a smartphone, family members, even if your child doesn't have a smartphone and it's someone else in school, it is so accessible these days through different apps. So it's raising that awareness to other families out there. And Rhonda, everything you've done, if you didn't get that killer off the street, how many other people's lives have you saved? And it's not something you can prove or disprove because you'll never know, but it's something we shouldn't have to know. And everyone here in this room, the more you talk about it to a friend, a family member, to a neighbor, someone at the school, it's just that small bit of awareness. And it doesn't have to be everyone. Everyone's not going to listen. Everyone's not going to open their ears and resonate with them. But if you just get to one person, that's potentially one life saved. I mean, that's all it really takes.
Frank, you have anything you want to expound on that part of connecting with the community?
I would just add that the families, you all, are the ones that really get us access to some of the schools. We've partnered with a number of initiatives in the city of New York that have really provided the opportunity. They're the vehicle into the school, and we've brought families in with us, and it's been really great. That partnership, as Mark just mentioned and Greg mentioned as well, is why we're able to make a difference. And it's not going to stop. We have to keep pressing forward. The percentage drops are great. It's positive, but it's not enough, and we will keep pushing forward together.
Greg, have you, in your travels, run into parents, families that don't want to work with DEA? And what would you say to someone to say, hey, give us a shot?
Well, fortunately, I haven't run into that. I've run into families that are frustrated. And, but again, and that's more on the prosecution side of things. And as we all know, depending on where you're prosecuting cases and what kind of relationship you have, is it federal or state, wherever the case goes, it can be challenging. It's not always that easy. But just to encourage people, and I think when I represent DEA, is I want to be out there to show, look, we are here to help, and we are here to listen. And that's what's important. And when they see that, and that door just creeps open a little bit, it'll start getting wider and wider and wider, and eventually you can gain that good partnership with that family and with that community. And I'd like to add one more thing too. Sure. When we talk about the impact of, you were just saying about, one person's life, I'm telling you, almost every single presentation I've given, I have kids coming up to me and sharing with me traumas they've gone through, drug problems they may have, or their friends, or even family members. I'm able to get them with a counselor at school, okay? But what's also important is sometimes those kids are saying, thank you for what you're doing. This is what I've gone through. I'm going to tell more people. So it just spreads like wildfire. So even if you may think it's only one person, at that moment, but that person's going to talk to another person and another person and another person. And that's what you all are doing. And, again, we're a law enforcement agency. We disrupt, dismantle, destroy drug trafficking organizations. That's what we do, and we do a hell of a job at that. But also that awareness is extremely important, and we all take part in that. So,
Mark, you've brought families to the Special Operations Division to tell their stories and educate our own workforce about the work. Would you recommend families go to other law enforcement organizations, either at the federal, state, or local level?
Absolutely. I'd recommend reaching out to your local DEA office, FBI office, local PDs, sheriff's departments. Everyone has a voice. The more people you reach out to, the better. I mean, there's an endless supply of people to talk to. Just reach out to everyone, even the fire departments. I mean, if not someone in their official capacity, whether they're a law enforcement professional, a first responder, an attorney, they have people that they can talk to. They may just talk to their friends about it over dinner and say, hey, I met a family member the other day and this is what happened. It's a story to tell, and it's going to get out there, and just it'll spread like wildfire. Just keep talking about it. Keep doing what you're already doing.
Rhonda, any closing thoughts about encouraging folks to continue to participate in the family summits and getting families that haven't yet participated to participate in 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, well, first of all, I just want to say that everyone here, between the work that the DEA does and the work of so many people I've met who raise awareness. I mean, when my son died, I didn't know what fentanyl was. I hear about it, read about it, see it everywhere now. So really hats off to everyone who's turning their pain into purpose. And thanks to you guys for your commitment and your compassion. I would just say encourage friends, people in your grief groups to come to the regional summits. And then hopefully to the national summit as well, but to bring more people in.
And I'm not stealing the administrator's thunder, but she's going to talk tomorrow about a network opportunity for you that we think is going to help propel even more connection outside of just the DEA Family Summits. Frank, closing thoughts or comments about families making a difference in the lives of you and your employees across the New York Field Division?
I would just say that at every family summit that we've had in the back of the room, for the New York families that are here, you know this, but and whether it was at Times Square, we've had agents, analysts, diversion investigators, chemists, and other professional staff in the audience, in the room, at the event in Times Square, and they hear your stories. And you get to see them, and you get to thank them, and they get to find out the why and what they do, and you're the why, right? And so I think bringing those two groups together is really important. It's powerful, and it does give us that, I would say, shared purpose, right? And so thank you for that, and thank you for being here today. It's awesome.
Thanks, Frank. Greg, same question. Any closing comments or thoughts about the role that you've seen families make in your life and your colleagues in Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois?
You guys drive us. You really do. So sharing your stories with us, look, and some of the families in here know I've cried with you. I've been to memorial services with you. I've stood and screamed with you at some of the other events that you guys have had. And we're here. And we're here because of you. And your voices will not go unheard. And that's what we're doing here. So just keep it up. And as I said earlier, it's a fight. And it's a fight because we need to change a culture. We really need to change a culture of, getting high is fun and things like that. In some cases, they're poisoning. Some cases, they're overdose. We have to change that culture. And we got to do that together. But thank you guys for everything you do. And we will be here.
Mark, same question. Final thought there. Thank you, Greg.
Like everyone said, the theme, families make a difference. I think by you being here with DEA, like we are a family, we're working together in this tragic tragedy that's brought us together. But it's staying in the fight, it's pushing on. Yeah, you look at the CDC's reporting numbers that are dropping, all right, that's great. It's a step in the right direction, but we are far from the goal. You take that collective breath and say, all right, cool. We're making progress. Get back in the fight. Let's go another round. Let's get those numbers to zero. That's the only thing that matters. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Stay in the fight, and thank you for partnering with us.
Awesome.
Rhonda, thank you. Frank, thank you. Greg, Mark, we appreciate you.